Hey, Bri. There you go. All right, let me make you co-presenter.
Sounds good. Sorry, I'm just kind of getting out of another meeting.
And it looks like Andrea from Macmillan is in the waiting room, so I'm going to let her in too. Hi, Andrea. Okay.
Hi, Andrea. I think you're on mute.
Yes, I am.
How are
This is
you?
my colleague, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Andrea. Welcome.
Thanks
So happy to have you.
Oh, it's great to be here. Just trying to set up my desktop here. There we go. Make sure my kitchen is clean.
Let's see. Are the other ladies gonna join us early too, Andrea?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm just waiting to see if I can see them in the waiting room.
Great.
So it starts recording automatically, but we'll cut the video so that it's only the
Okay.
speaking
Good.
portion.
Good.
It's mostly just so we don't forget to turn on the recording.
Yeah. I hate these crazy things, but they work so well.
Very.
Like I should be taking your reservation on your cruise line.
Or singing a Britney Spears song.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Either or.
Better. What was the final number that registered?
I think we got to 77.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So we'll see how many people click on. Yeah, it'll be great though. Lots of like organizations that haven't necessarily tuned it in the past. So it's a good engagement point for them, which is awesome.
Great.
Yeah, and I see we've got 4 polls to launch in this one.
Right, and if it's too many, just pick 2. Yeah.
No, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, Andrea, were you thinking of prompting me when you're ready, or is it sort of at the end of the slide?
Let's wait till Tessa gets on because she'll be doing those slides. I wouldn't be surprised that she describes it first and then, or actually it's probably easier for you to launch it while she's talking so people can vote.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense.
Right.
No, is that Tessa? Yeah, I think she's in the waiting room, so we'll get her in.
Great.
Such a nice setup in the background there.
Yeah.
I feel a little embarrassed by my little office here.
Tessa's in Vancouver, and when we have staff meetings, she often sits in front of her window or outside, and you see these amazing kind of mountainscapes.
Yeah, with the weather turning now too, I'm seeing a lot more people in meetings just with their backyards in the background and things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely gonna go work outside after this on my patio. But they're not great for meetings. The kids next door got a trampoline, so it's pretty much trampoline city 24/7. So
Oh gosh, that's funny. Hey, Tessa.
hi. Oh, I think you're on mute. Let me just unmute you.
There we go.
There you go. So this is my colleague Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Tessa, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I think Tessa's going to be doing the majority of the presentation. So we were just chatting about the polls and whether you want to just prompt Brian and he can launch them in the background.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Do you want me just with my words, or
Yeah.
is there like
Yeah.
okay. Cool. Let me just pull up which slides the polls come at.
I think it's 6, 11, 20, and 29.
Yep, perfect. That's exactly it. How's Toronto today?
Gorgeous.
So sunny and nice.
Is it?
Beautiful.
I'm in Vancouver, so I never know what's going on in Toronto.
I was saying that you often like have these amazing kind of backgrounds that I kind of covet.
Yeah, it's gray today though, so I'm the one that's jealous of you now.
Yeah, it's been a weird spring so far for sure. I think we're probably in the first 5-day sunny stretch we've had in all year, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been hearing lots of complaints from my friends. It was like snowing in May or something. That's not good.
Mhm.
Anna.
Hey y'all.
Andrea and Tessa are from Macmillan Vantage, so they're just joining so we can figure out any last minute things for our webinar.
I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, so I mean, just in terms of like rundown, like I said before, when we sort of start, I'll give a little bit of an introduction and housekeeping, and then just launch in basically to your bios, and then I'll throw it over to you, Andrea, to do some context, like you were saying.
Right.
And Brian will launch the polls in the background. And Anna, if you want to maybe just keep an eye on the chat,
Sure.
and make sure we're not missing anything there. And then Tharshika, if she manages to jump on early, oh, there's Melanie,
Oh, good.
can do the questions at the end if there's any questions in the chat.
Sounds good.
Oh, and Brian, I don't think it matters for you because I'll still prompt you, but because we added a couple more slides to the presentation, those numbers are off. So I'm just updating which slides those questions will come at.
Sounds great. And I will.
All right, I feel like the gang's all here now.
Yeah, I think Mel's audio is just connecting.
And we'll just give it a few more minutes. There's only 15 people so far in the waiting room. So.
And Kendra, I'll be able to share my screen.
Yeah, actually, let me do that right now. Let me make you a host. And that should give you the ability to share your screen.
Looks like I'll be able to.
Okay, great.
Yeah, the patterns from the last few of these is there's a steady trickle into the session in the first 10 minutes.
Right after lunch. Yeah. Oh, you're on mute, Mel. There you go.
Mute. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
My first time being able to figure out how to use it on my phone and my computer at the same time.
This is great news. All right. Oh, it's trampoline time outside. I was telling Andrea that the kids next door got a trampoline, so it's pretty much been nonstop trampoline party for the last couple of days. I'm jealous.
You can go ahead and join them.
Yeah.
Mel and Tessa, Kendra was saying that there's 77 people registered for the call today, so it's a great crowd.
That's good.
Mhm.
Amazing. Is everyone going to pop up on here?
Yeah, I mean, we encourage people to share their videos, so you'll be able to see everyone's faces. Maybe we'll just give it one more minute. What do you think, Bri?
Yeah, one more minute, then we'll start letting everyone in.
And the PowerPoint's going to pop up somewhere.
Yeah, Tessa's gonna share her screen.
Awesome.
Yeah, I got it all loaded up, so it should be easy enough.
Okay. We just usually let people congregate in the waiting room so that I don't have to repeat myself 6 times. Put your mics on mute. Put your mics on mute. All right, do we want to start letting folks in? There's 36 people right now, so we can get started and people will trickle in.
Right.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're gonna get started in about a minute. If you wanna take the time to just put your organization and name in the chat so we can get to know you, that would be amazing. All right, let's get started. First of all, thank you and welcome, and thanks so much for spending your time with us today. My name is Kendra. I'm the Manager of Partnerships and Projects with the MLSE Foundation, and we're so happy today to have our friends from Macmillan Vantage join us today. I'm going to start off with just a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll jump right into the presentation. If you want to post your name and your organization in the chat so we can get to know you and see who's joining us today, that will be most welcome. We're recording the session today and it will be posted on our website. So if you don't want to be recorded and posted on the website, feel free to shut your camera off, but we would love to see your faces. Pets and children always welcome. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. If you have any comments, questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can direct them to MLSE Foundation directly or to everyone. And our staff will get back to you. If you have any IET issues, same thing, put it in the chat and we'll try to help you troubleshoot. And for today, we're going to be sharing a PowerPoint deck. So if you want to change the speaker mode on Zoom to be speaker view or speaker mode, you'll be able to follow along better with the presentation. And so I just want to introduce the organization and the speakers. Macmillan Vantage Policy Group is a full-service national public affairs firm. The Macmillan Vantage Government Relations Team helps organizations be more competitive by advancing key issues and priorities while reducing the risks to which they are exposed, as well as provide strategic communications advice to help position and promote big social issues for more and better impact. We have three folks here with us today. Andrea Donlin is a strategic communications consultant at Macmillan Vantage with a focus on social impact and corporate citizenship. She works with charities and nonprofits to position their organizations and promote big social issues for more and better impact. Melanie Paradis is a key member of Macmillan Vantage Ontario's National Public Affairs team. Melanie has a wealth of experience in government relations and crisis communications, including a decade working in conservative politics in the war rooms of Doug Ford and Andrew Scheer. She helps clients build coalitions of third-party advocates and help get their most important projects and policies advanced. Tessa Seeger is a principal at Macmillan Vantage and brings her background in law and politics to the public affairs practice. She's been working at the forefront of the COVID-19 crisis with Melanie to help interpret how government announcements can meet the needs and priorities of organizations. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea to jump right into the slide. And again, feel free to post any questions or comments in the chat.
Great, thank you so much, Kendra. We really appreciate you having us here today, and a big thanks to the entire MLSE Foundation for hosting us. As Kendra said, I'm Andrea Donlin, and I really want to start off today by recognizing all the really incredible work that each and every one of you and your organizations are leading right now. We've heard from a lot of players in the nonprofit and charitable space that you're all having to do so much more with so much less, that demand is at its highest while fundraising is at new lows. And it's really this kind of lack of cash coming in that is the biggest problem for many of you. In addition to the fact that we've heard that you don't have the big capital assets to secure, that many of you are just really trying to hang on, and then starting to think about how you can set the stage for recovery as well as transformation. So really what today's session is all about is helping you better understand what kind of government relief programs are available to you, help you over these next kind of couple months. We've heard a big number that based on all the announcements that have been made over the past couple months by the feds, that you have access to about $4.2 billion worth of support. And Tessa's going to walk you through what kinds of programs are available. So if we go to the agenda slide, you'll see that we'll cover things off like paying, retaining, and hiring employees. We'll talk about access to credit. We'll talk about deferrals, and then we'll also talk about sector-specific funding. We also have a few polls that we'll launch throughout today's presentation, so we'd love to hear back from you and hear your participation. We'll have a Q&A, as Kendra said, at the back end so that we can answer any specific questions. And then also know that the detailed presentation that Tessa's going to walk you through today will be made available to you afterwards as well. And then on the next slide, Kendra mentioned that I'm joined today with Melanie Parody and Tessa Seeger. Melanie's going to start us off, and then Tessa is going to take us through the detailed presentation. Maybe what I'll do now is turn it over to Melanie to talk a little bit about an overview of the situation.
Hi, everyone. So, you know, COVID-19 has been a rapidly evolving situation. Of course, it's been, I think it's been 10 weeks now, but it feels like both forever and 2 days at the same time somehow. Governments, what's been really important to remember throughout all of this is that governments at all levels are making decisions today for today. There still hasn't been a lot of planning ahead. They still, they just don't have the capacity to do that yet. Although, of course, they're trying and they want to get to that place. So keep that in mind, that a lot of the programs that we're talking about are really still just the beginning, even though there are so many and there's a lot of different names, and it can be very overwhelming to hear about all of the different options that are available. It really is just the beginning. There will be a lot more coming from government until we have a vaccine, and even then to help roll out that vaccine. Something else that's important to keep in mind is that a lot of the goals that the federal government has and that the provincial governments have had in terms of their policy objectives from the last election or that they've implemented since then, they're still in place. So take the environment, for example. The federal government absolutely still wants to reach their goals related to environmental policy, but of course, the COVID-19 crisis has kind of put all of that on the back burner a bit. So to the extent that some of your organizations might be able to help them to still achieve some of their goals in those policy areas in the midst of all of this uncertainty, that's something that they'd be really interested in hearing about. And one of the things that, as we talk through the different programs that are available, we really want to encourage you to do is bring your ideas to government, all levels of government, whether it's provincial levels or the federal level or even the municipalities, have all been pretty clear that they really are looking to stakeholders. They're looking to you as experts in your field to give them ideas for how they can help make the situation better, how they can help roll out essential services to Canadians, how they can reopen the economy safely. And we all play a part in that, and so do your organizations. Again, the information's evolving daily. Even since we started putting this presentation together a week or two ago, Tessa's gone and added in some more programs as the government has introduced them. So I think that we're pretty up to date for today, but you know, even as late as, you know, as early as 5 o'clock this afternoon, there might be another program announced. So it's important to stay on top of that. I'll hand it over to Tessa.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're going to begin with measures designed to help you pay, retain, and hire new employees. So let's get right into it with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Brian, do you want to set off that first poll there? Okay, so the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy provides a subsidy of 75% of the wages paid by an employer to each employee to a maximum of $847 per week. I'm sure everyone on the line has some sort of general familiarity with the subsidy, and it looks like about half of you have already applied for it, so that's great. We're going to spend a bit of time running through the finer details related specifically to charities and nonprofits, but jump in if you have any questions that pop up. So first and foremost, registered charities and nonprofit organizations are eligible to receive the subsidy, and these groups can receive the subsidy for a wide variety of employees. They can get the subsidy for employees that have been with the organization throughout the pandemic. They can receive the subsidy for employees who maybe they had to let go for reasons related to the pandemic, but have since been brought back into the fold. And they can receive the subsidy for new employees, for employees hired after March 20th, 2020. There's no limit on the number of employees that an employer can claim the subsidy for. Not every charity and nonprofit can access the subsidy though. To qualify, you have to be affected by COVID-19. So what does that mean? Well, this is where it gets a bit complicated, so bear with me. There's 3 4-week blocks: March to April, April to May May to June. We know now that the program will be extended until August 29th, which means effectively there'll be 6 4-week blocks. But for the purposes of explaining it today, let's just keep with the 3 that you see on your screen. So to qualify for block 1, an employer's eligibility period revenue, its March 2020 revenue, must be at least 15% lower than its baseline revenue. To qualify for blocks 2 and blocks 3, an employer's eligibility period revenue, its April 2020 revenue, and its May 2020 revenue must be at least 30% lower than its baseline revenue. Now, when it comes to calculating baseline revenue, you have a choice. You can either use that same month's revenue from 2019, or you can use an average of January and February 2020 revenue. So for example, for block 1, my baseline revenue can be either my March 2019 revenue, or it can be my average of January and February 2020 revenue. So let me say that again. The applicant gets to pick which way to measure their baseline revenue, and that choice was brought in after the program was criticized for being too restrictive. New companies, for example, that didn't exist in March 2019, well, they wouldn't have any revenue to show in March 2019, and so would have been involuntarily excluded from the program. So the baseline revenue choice makes the program a bit more easy to access, a bit more flexible. Overall, it's a good thing, but the important thing to remember is that the method of calculation choice must be consistent. So you can't alternate between the 2 methods depending on what's most favorable for that specific block. You pick one unit of measurement and you stick with it. So now that I've confused you all with math and calculations and revenue reduction thresholds, there's one more wrench to throw into the picture, but don't worry, it's a good wrench. So there's actually something in the legislation, it's called a deeming provision. And this means that if an employer qualifies for one period, it's automatically deemed to qualify for the next one, even if the employer doesn't meet the required revenue drop for that successive period. So for example, I'm an employer, I'm looking at a 20% revenue drop in March 2020. Great, I qualify for block 1. I also qualify for block 2, even if my April 2020 revenue reduction is, say, 6%. So the deeming provision exists to provide employers with a bit more comfort, a bit more capacity to do some long-term thinking. You know, you're not going to bring back an employee for 4 weeks and then have to let them go again because all of a sudden you don't have any more support. So I think it's a really important part of the program. I think it's good policy. I'm just not sure how well it's been communicated. It's definitely not front page news, and I'm not sure how many people are aware of it. But the good news is now all of you are. So the last piece of the puzzle for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy is calculating what is revenue. So for registered charities, revenue is revenue from a related business as defined in the Income Tax Act, gifts and other amounts received in the course of ordinary activities. For nonprofit organizations, it includes membership fees and other amounts received in the course of ordinary activities. Specifically for registered charities and nonprofits, you guys have a choice of whether or not to include revenue from government sources, such as grants, when applying for the subsidy. But like the baseline revenue choice, you must take the same approach for each period applied for. So for example, when I'm calculating my March 2020 numbers, I can't choose to include grants for that. And then when I'm calculating my April 2020 revenues, choose to exclude government grants. So I have to keep it consistent. As for the application process, well, some of you will, it seems, have already gone through it. So that's great. Applications are made for each 4-week block that an employer is eligible for. Applications are done online through the CRA. Right now, applications are open for block 1 and block 2. You also have the choice to wait until September to make all your applications at once. This will delay receipt of money, but what's important for some people is to have that full picture of what March 2020 to August 2020 revenue looks like when they make that permanent baseline revenue election choice. So they're basically just waiting to make sure they have the most available amount of information at their fingertips. And that's why they would make the choice to delay their applications. So before launching the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the government introduced a 10% subsidy. And this was meant to achieve the exact same objective as the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, incentivize employers to retain their employees. But it quickly became apparent that 10% was way, way, way too small a measure. And that's why we have this lovely, complicated situation where we have a 10% subsidy and we have the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Is there a question with Lori's iPad? No? Okay, I'll keep going. We'll do some questions at the end if people can't get their questions in now. So despite the bigger, better Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, the 10% subsidy is still important for us here today for two reasons. One, it's helpful for employers who can't show that required revenue drop to qualify for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And secondly, the 10% subsidy actually affects how much Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy money you'll receive. And we'll get into that a bit more on the next slide. So what is the 10% subsidy? Well, it's available to nonprofits and registered charities. It runs from March 18th to June 19th. It's equal to 10% of remuneration paid up to $1,375 for each eligible employee, with a total cap per employer of $25,000. Employers are asked to manually calculate the subsidy and then reduce that amount from their current payroll remittance of federal or provincial income tax. Now, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the 10% subsidy are intended to provide total support of up to 75% for payroll. Not 75% plus 10%, not 85%, just 75%. So you may be eligible for both subsidies, but that doesn't mean you'll get 85% of an employee's wages subsidized. For people on the line who've already applied to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, they'll have seen line F of the application. This line requires employers who are eligible for the 10% subsidy to enter the total amount of the 10% subsidy that they're eligible for, whether or not you've actually taken advantage of the 10% subsidy by reducing payroll remittance and then actually keeping that money in your pocket. The full amount of the 10% subsidy that you're eligible for, the amount that you entered in line F, that will actually be deducted from your Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy payment. Again, whether or not you've actually taken advantage of it. So that's obviously problematic for people who didn't deduct payroll remittance and now are getting less than the 75% of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy that the government is providing. Don't worry though, it will all be sorted out. The CRA has said it will treat you as having over-remitted your employee source deductions and will require you to fill out a self-identification form. They said it's coming in the coming months, and then they'll credit your payroll program account. Moving on to employee programs, the Canada Summer Jobs Program has been amended in response to COVID-19. The government has enacted a number of changes. The most notable change, increasing the wage subsidy from 50% to 100% for private sector employees and public sector employees, is immaterial to us here today because nonprofit employers already received a 100% wage subsidy. However, there are changes that are relevant to anyone on the line that had placements lined up. For example, placements can now be part-time, placements can be extended until February 28th, 2021, and if necessary and desired, project and job activities can be changed as well. Lastly, while the Canada Summer Jobs call for applications closed this past February, the government did say that it will work with MPs to identify organizations that provide essential services in the community and could provide youth jobs, but hadn't applied for the program in February. So if this is you, reach out to your MP, see if the opportunity is still open. You may be able to bring in a student or two. The work sharing program. Okay, this was one of the government's very first economic responses to COVID-19. when they were still very tepidly testing the waters of what could be done, what needed to be done. The work sharing program is a pre-existing program. It provides EI benefits to eligible employees who agree to reduce their normal working hours and share the available work when their employer experiences a temporary reduction in the normal level of business activity. So basically everyone works a little bit less because there's a little bit less work, and then the government makes up those missed hours by paying EI to make the employees whole. And one of the most important changes for us here today is that this program has been extended to include non-for-profit organization employers. Previously, this group of employers was ineligible for the program. Other changes include increasing the maximum length of an agreement from 38 weeks to 76 weeks, and easing and streamlining the application process. You can apply online by completing an application for a work sharing agreement. It's available online. You email it in together with some supporting documents. We also have the Canada Student Service Grant. This is a new national service initiative. It will provide up to $5,000 to support a student's post-secondary education costs in the fall if the student volunteers in the fight against COVID-19. What this looks like in practice is unclear. Details right now are still pretty sparse, but do continue to check in at the government's I Want to Help platform over the coming weeks to see if your organization can take advantage of this program. Moving on to help with cash flow, well, we only have one program to speak about at this time, and that's the highly anticipated, still not open, Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. Brian, I think we've got another poll here. If you can put it up on the screen. This program offers forgivable loans to eligible commercial property owners if they reduce the rent owed by their tenants by at least 75% for April, May, and June. So essentially, the tenant pays 25% of rent, the government pays the next 50% of rent, and then the landlord is asked to forego that final 25%. The program's been subjected to a fair amount of criticism. For one, it's totally voluntary, it's not mandatory, so there's been some speculation as to whether property owners will voluntarily choose to participate in a program that sees them eat 25% of their rent intake. And secondly, on the timing, it's a bit slow to roll out. I mean, the applications aren't open yet. It's set to expire in June, which is just basically next week. And there's been no indication that it will be extended beyond June. But we'll see what happens. If you're interested, nonprofits and charitable organizations do qualify as eligible tenants, provided they pay no more than $50,000 in monthly gross rent, generate no more than $20 million in gross annual revenues, and have either temporarily ceased operations or have experienced at least a 70% decline in pre-COVID-19 revenues. The application portal opens May 25th. It's up to the property owner to apply. Sample agreements are available online now for you to take a look at. Tenants are encouraged to work with their landlords now to discuss the agreement. Looks like about 80% of you haven't tried to have that conversation with your landlord. I'm sure there's a variety of reasons for that. Maybe we can get into more of an open Q&A on that in the questions. So the previous programs all addressed incoming cash, but it's also important that organizations are aware of deferrals so that they aren't unnecessarily making payments that can be put off at no harm. And we've seen a fair number of these. At the federal level, GST, HST payments, those have all been deferred until June 30th, 2020. Registered charity returns that were due throughout the year are now all due December 31st. And for those of you that had a T2 or a T1044 filing deadline between March 18th and May 31st, the new deadline is June 1st, which is coming up now, I realized. And if you owe any income tax payments, those have been deferred until September 1st, 2020. At the provincial level, for Ontario, we have seen WSIB premium reporting and payments deferred for up to 6 months, either the start of August or the end of August, depending what schedule you fall in. And we've also seen the employer health tax exemption for 2020 only be extended from $490,000 to $1 million. So what this means is that employers are exempt from the employer health tax on the first $1 million of total Ontario remuneration in 2020. Previously, you would only be exempt on the first 490,000. There's also been a number of provincially administered taxes that have been deferred until August 31st. We have a full list there up on the screen. To be honest, I'm not sure how relevant they are to anyone on the line here, but do take a look at that and see if that's of note to you. Our last section addresses sector-specific funding, and the big one is the Emergency Community Support Fund. Brian, can we have our third pull-up on the screen there, please? This fund has $350 million in it to be given out to charities and nonprofit organizations. The money flows through 3 organizations: the United Way, Canadian Red Cross, and Community Foundations of Canada. So each one of those 3 has separate eligibility criteria and a separate application process. Applications just went live early this week, so a lot of this is super fresh, but I was pretty impressed with each website. Lots of information available online. I'll run through the 3 organizations at a fairly high level, and we do encourage you to take a look at the websites. So the United Way portion of the fund, for funding through the United Way, you'll apply to your local United Way. Each local United Way has a set amount of funding to distribute. So for example, I looked at the United Way Toronto page, and they have $11 million for community services in the Peel region, the City of Toronto, and York region. They're giving out grants from between $10,000 to $50,000 to support initiatives that address pressing social inclusion or well-being needs. And interestingly, I assume a lot of you are in the Toronto area, United Way Toronto is having online information sessions May 25th, 27th, and 29th. And the first application deadline is June 5th at 5 p.m. The second organization giving out funding is the Community Foundations of Canada. Here, local community foundations across Canada will accept and assess applications from qualified donees through a centralized national portal. Qualified donees must be registered on the CRA's list of qualified donees. They include registered charities and registered Canadian amateur athletic associations. A non-exhaustive list of eligible projects is available online at the applicant guide, and applications must be in by July 27th, but they are assessed on a rolling basis, so the sooner you can get it in, the better. The last organization under this fund is the Canadian Red Cross, and they actually have 2 streams. They have the granting program for nonprofits. This is just for nonprofit applicants. Registered charities are ineligible. And applicants must have an annual revenue of less than $1.5 million. And they must dedicate at least 50% of core activities to direct service delivery. Applicants are to be seeking at least $5,000. There's a whole slew of eligible projects. They pretty much relate anything you could imagine to COVID-19, but I will highlight one that I think will be of interest, and that's adapting or realigning existing service delivery and programming to a COVID-19 reality. So any transformations you need to make to bring services online, that would fall under that. And then the second stream of the Canadian Red Cross is what's called the Preventing Disease Transmission Training and Equipment Program. This is open for organizations that are organized and operated exclusively for social welfare, civic improvement, pleasure, recreation, or any other purpose except profit. And the program targets frontline workers responding to COVID-19 in what they call low to medium risk environments. The program helps frontline volunteers, one, procure PPE, and then also train them on how to use that equipment. So we have this handy Government of Canada infographic that gives you some information about the 3 or really 4 streams of the fund. And like I said, I do encourage you to poke around at the website. There's a lot of information that's just been recently made available. So I'm going to run through the rest of these sector-specific funds fairly quickly. Food, the federal government gave $100 million to national, regional, and local organizations across Canada to support food security. we saw $50 million go to Food Banks Canada, $20 million be divided between the Salvation Army, Second Harvest, Community Food Centers Canada, and Breakfast Club Canada. And that left $30 million for local level organizations, which was distributed through the Local Food Infrastructure Fund. If you are interested in accessing some of this money, there's an email there that you can make an initial request under. Homelessness and domestic violence victims. So we saw in response to COVID-19, the government give these groups some additional money. You can see the breakdown on your screen there, $157.5 million for homelessness, $40 million to Women and Gender Equality Canada, and then $10 million for Indigenous Service Canada's existing 46 emergency shelters. For that $20 million that you can see that went to Women's Shelters Canada, a list of the funded women's shelters is available online, and apparently 422 of them have received funding so far. Cultural heritage and sport, the government announced a $500 million fund for these sectors. Most of the funding is pre-pledged, but there is a phase 2 of the program where people can make an application, and more details will come in the coming weeks. The Indigenous Community Support Fund, this was a $305 million fund. There was $15 million of it set aside for Indigenous organizations and communities providing services to Indigenous peoples in urban centers or off reserve. The call for proposals for these organizations and communities has now closed. For seniors, we saw the government provide United Way Canada with $9 million to disperse funds to organizations whose primary focus is helping seniors. And this money was distributed based on population numbers. An additional $20 million for the same program was pledged just last week, and I imagine it will be distributed in a similar way. Relief Fund. Here, this is a provincial measure. The Ontario government provided $40 million to support residential service providers. Agencies with residential service programs can request funding through a Ministry of Children, Community, and Social Services regional or corporate office. Ontario's Emergency Assistance Program, the provincial government dedicated $200 million in social services relief funding to help protect the health and safety of vulnerable populations. Funding was available for shelters, food banks, charities, nonprofits, and funding is said to have been allocated through those municipal service managers and district social services administration boards based on local priorities. Then we have the pandemic pay, and we've got one last poll for you guys. The pandemic pay is a joint federal provincial initiative to boost the wages of frontline staff. It amounts to an extra $4 an hour on top of regular wages, plus an additional $250 for workers who end up working over 100 hours in a 4-week period. To qualify, you need to be both an eligible worker and be in an eligible workplace. So we have a list of the social services section up on the screen there for you to look at. The top-up runs from April 24th to August 13th, and employers do not need to apply. In fact, eligible employers are apparently all supposed to have been contacted by the government as of May 15th. So I hope that's the case. If people on the line believe they should have been contacted and haven't, please do feel free to reach out to me and we can look into that. So our last slide on this section here just has some final, additional spending that we've seen from both levels of government. At the federal level, $7.5 million went to Kids Help Phone and $100 million went to Canadian Red Cross. At the provincial level, $2.7 million to support victims of domestic violence and other violent crimes. $37 million for Indigenous people and communities, and then $12 million to immediately expand online and virtual mental health supports. And finally, we did want to discuss one more thing. I know access to credit is a big deal right now. There are some loan programs available to nonprofit organizations and charities, but they must have generated a portion of revenue from the sales of goods or services. So we've set out details on the Canada Emergency Business Account, the BDC co-lending program, and the EDC loan guarantee program that may be worth taking a look at if your organization is looking for help with cash flow and does generate a portion of its revenue from the sales of goods or services. And that is it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That was so much information. I thought I was like pretty well informed on all of the programs that are out there, and I didn't know half of those. So that's really awesome. One thing maybe off the top that might be helpful for organizations, you talked at the very beginning about getting in contact with government and really pitching them ideas around their organizations. Where's a good place for organizations to start if they don't have a government relations person, or maybe they're not connected currently to any government funding? Where's a good place for them to start?
Mel, do you want to take that? You want me to?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself twice. So it really depends on whether it's federal or provincial, like what jurisdiction you're in. If you want to be, making a particular ask of government, there are a lot of organizations that feel like they don't really fit in, even though there are so many programs that perhaps there isn't that perfect fit for you and you're kind of falling through the cracks. So I recommend, writing a briefing note for the usually like your regular touch point with government, whether that be a provincial minister's office or a federal minister's office, or ideally both. We're finding that a lot of our clients they're more likely to get success if they can get the feds and the provinces to talk to each other about what they need. If you can get the municipality that you're in, or your minister provincially to ask the federal government on your behalf, it's a really powerful tool to help you to be heard by the federal government for your request.
I would also encourage you to reach out to Imagine Canada and Bruce McDonald and his team. They've been kind of acting as the kind of go-to place for charities and nonprofits to better understand sector-wide needs. So to Mel's point, you might be have a very specific situation and you're falling through the cracks, or after talking with Imagine Canada, you might realize that you're one of many facing the same thing, and to have a sector-wide kind of orientation to advancing those needs. Imagine Canada is doing a very good job at that right now.
That's amazing. Tharshika, did we have any questions in the chat for our guests?
Yep. So one question is, are any of the wage support programs available to international students?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head, and we'd have to look into that. I know there was some discussion around whether the Canada Emergency Student Benefit would be available to international students. But I think that the answer would be yes, because for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, it doesn't matter the nationality of the employee, it's just if they're located in Canada.
And they may have to have a social insurance number.
Right.
That might be a requirement. I'm not quite sure what well, you know what, that's one that we should take back and find out.
Yeah, let us look into that for you.
Awesome.
We can include the answer when we send out the email and the slideshow in the next couple of days. So thanks for that question.
And then another question here, there are two questions around this. So it's around the CSJ. So how does CEWS and wage top up of the CSJ work together? So one organization is saying that they pay their CSJ employees more than minimum wage. And then someone has followed up with asking if anyone has received an official confirmation of the CSJ placements.
On the second question, I was on a call yesterday that was specific to the agriculture industry, but they did mention the Canada Summer Jobs Placements, I guess, update, and they said that organizations should be contacted very soon. So I don't think anyone has really got that official confirmation yet, but it should be coming shortly. And then the question on, was it how does the Canada Summer Jobs Program interact with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a bit of a complicated one. I think a lot of this, everyone's just trying to sort it out as it comes along. As Mel said, people are making decisions today for problems today. And there's lots of things that people haven't even thought of. And then when you go through these application processes and you realize, oh, I have a Canada Summer Jobs Placement and I have a Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, no one's actually thought about how those have interacted. So I think people are figuring that out on the fly. And I would just continue to move forward with the applications and keep track of your records and make your applications and see what happens.
I just noticed that someone in the chat noted that they got a call from their MP and that an official email from Service Canada is coming tomorrow, which is great. But I wanted to flag that in addition to contacting either your municipality or the relevant minister to your file, that getting your local MP or MPP or MLA, depending on what province you're in, to help you is also a great thing for them to do. I know that they're all very busy, but they also want to feel like they're adding value to their local communities, and being able to help you to access these programs is 90% of their job right now. And so feel free to send their constituency office your request saying, hey, we haven't heard back. Can you help us? Can you flag this to your parliamentary colleague? Whether they are in the same party or not, it doesn't matter. They all work together for COVID.
Another question here around the Emergency Community Support Fund links that were included in the chat. So I see that United Way, for example, has listed 2 different application deadlines. Do you know whether a similar amount of funds are being administered in each round of applications?
I'm not sure. I would check out the website and see if you can find that information online. As I said, this all came out very recently, so there's lots of information to digest, but it did seem pretty helpful. So I would imagine that you can find an answer on the website, and I'll take a look too and see what I can find.
We'll also include the links to the websites where you can find more information on those programs, specifically through United Way, Red Cross, and Community Foundations of Canada. So you can have direct links to where you can find those answers.
Yeah, and those are linked here on the slide, which we'll send out after this. So that should be a good starting point.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I see we've kind of come to the end of our list in the group chat. All right, well, it looks like you've provided so much information, no one has any questions. So that's wonderful. If you do kind of percolate on this information and have questions in the next couple of days, feel free to reach out to us. We can see if we can help you answer those quickly. And I just wanted to thank our presenters today, Andrea, Tessa, and Melanie, for joining us and spending your time with us. You know, we know that time is precious these days, and we really thank you for helping the organizations that we work with to sort of transverse this very complicated funding sector that we see now. So again, thank you so much. In terms of next sessions, our next sessions will be on child protection with right to play on June 4th. So we'll send a link to that in the coming days. And I just want to put in a little plug for our collaborative Slack channel. If you're interested in getting more information and collaboratively sharing with the other organizations in these community learning series, that's a great place to go and find some more resources that you can take a look at for your organization. And the link has been posted in the chat, and we'll send it around in the email again. So yeah, thank you everybody for spending your time with us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, guys.